So we're recording, Adam. You're okay if we're recording this?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So tell me more about your hip, Adam.
Yeah, so the background with it, I saw you, I think it was last August or so. Uh, and I mean, we had some ideas, but nothing concrete. And the main thing that really seemed to help it was to not run on it, just resting it and not trying to aggravate it much. So with it being the end of the season last year, I pretty much took the approach of resting it, not testing it, just getting my swimming and cycling fitness super high, and knock out a couple of races before I lost all of my run fitness from before. And that actually worked pretty well. Yeah, did two Ironmans in September, and then after that, I pretty much called it a season. Ended up getting fourth and fifth in those with semi-decent runs.
Not bad.
Yeah, pretty much took October, pretty easy. Didn't really do much in the way, especially in the way of running. And then when I started building back up, starting in November, things went pretty smooth. It was, I never really felt anything like wrong in my hip. Like I'd still get like that feeling when I flex it towards my chest. If I get enough on that end of range of motion, I could feel it in the hip flexor, maybe a tad, but I wouldn't have called it pain, and I wouldn't have called it like an issue because I pretty much had like forced myself to feel it for
So
the most part.
that's only when you're self-testing, not when you're running, cycling, or swimming.
At that point, yes.
At that point, this was October.
November.
Okay.
Well, yeah, pretty much October as well. I mean, by the time I was racing, I didn't feel it.
Gotcha.
I was just taking extra precaution. But it seemed to have resolved before the races because I never felt it during the course of my racing.
Gotcha.
And because of the rest.
Help me remember, after I saw you in August, I don't remember hearing of any additional treatment, just adjusting your training volume.
Yes, it was pretty much simply rest. Well, rest in the run. I was still doing a lot of swimming and a lot of biking, a lot of hard biking, which didn't seem to affect it really much at all. I mean, when it's flaring up, I do feel it some in the swim, like on flip turns and such. Just because it'll like get into that position, and it seems like if some things get tight, then it might be pulling on that area, type of deal. But it's more of the run for sure.
Okay.
It was pretty direct correlation. That's what made it worse.
Gotcha. Now, November, what was the difference in November?
I mean, it was basically like, back to normal. Never had any issue with it, and I think all the way through, call it February. Yeah, sometime in February, I've done a large block, and really I built up to some of my highest mileage running that I had ever. Some consistent 50+ mile weeks.
Wow.
And without really worrying about it, or without it being an issue. And then it started to sort of creep up on me over like a week or two or so. Like I first noticed it back on an easy week, like a recovery week. So when I backed things off.
Any chance you remember the Monday of that week?
Let's see.
Or after this, could you look it up in your training logs?
Yeah, I could look it up. Yep. Yeah.
Just send me that afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, and it was, I mean, it was pretty high volume running for me before that point, and I didn't take it. Yeah, I mean, I sort of knew what it felt like from the prior experience, but I didn't. I was sort of hopeful it would just resolve on its own. The sort of niggles that come with a lot of training, and it became more and more apparent that wasn't wasn't the case, and I think I started compensating a little bit in my runs because of it. So,
Okay.
and then I proceeded to take a spill on the bike and land on that same exact tip, like probably a week after it started flaring up, and that didn't help things either. So,
Now, help me understand the pattern just a little bit better. What I heard was you went from a high running volume for the first time in a while, and I didn't hear any trouble then. And then you mentioned that it was more during a recovery week. Did you feel it during the recovery week, or as you started running more after the recovery week?
I believe it was the Thursday, like, the recovery started, at the beginning of the week where things sort of dialed back. Actually, I had a couple of days off of running. I'd actually been more concerned about my shin that likes to occasionally flare up on me, and just from impact forces. But that wasn't quite like like at a super serious stage or anything. And then the Thursday into that recovery week, after one of those runs, fairly easy 9-mile run, I just, I felt it a little bit, and it's like the first thought that I brought to it.
Gotcha. Now, when you were doing the 50-mile weeks, what was the longest distance that you had ran pain-free during the 50-mile weeks?
I think 17 miles. Yeah,
And that was
yeah.
without.
I hadn't built up to the 20 plus mile runs yet, but I think I had a 17 miler on a off-road surface, which I think most of my running at that point was on trails and such.
Gotcha. Okay. So before we get into some movement and evaluation, let me just ask you this question. You're a smart person. You're an RN. You know the human body very well, and you know training very well. Let me ask you this. Knowing what you know about yourself and your training volume, what tissues do you think are involved, and what do you think was the precipitating event that went from being pain-free and then up to 17 miles without trouble to then feeling it at 9 miles?
I think it's possible that with the training volume I was carrying leading into that recovery week, I mean, it could have started being an issue, but I might have been on that riding that high of training and sort of been masking it a little bit. So it might not have been that that run specifically where it started, but maybe just where I first noticed it.
Okay.
I did wear a new pair of shoes for the first time on that run. More cushioned, heavier type of shoe. I don't know that I would specifically blame it, but
Sure.
if it does like to migrate around the hip area, depending on the day, depending what I've done, and but I mean, if my inclination is to think it's partial hip flexor, partial psoas, like iliac psoas issue,
Okay.
because I do feel it's triggered some with the lifting of my leg towards, like, especially if it's resisted
Sure.
towards my body. I feel like that's part of a strain type issue.
And you feel that initially when you move it, not just at the end point of hip flexion. So like
Uh,
I was there standing next to you and I put pressure on your knee and said, so your femur, your leg bone is in line with your spine. And I had my hand on your knee and I asked you to contract your hip flexors and bring your knee to your chest. Initially, with that amount of resistance, you would feel it. It's not just at the extreme or the end point of when the femur comes towards your spine.
correct.
Okay.
When it's flaring up the most, like right now, with since I've already started dialing things back pretty well, it's not super sensitive, but yeah, I'd say a combination of I feel it. That's one thing that triggers it is the raising of the leg, flexing it towards the chest, especially when resisted, and also just sort of the impact and the push off some with the running.
Interesting. Okay. Let me get a little bit more. I have a couple of questions that popped up in my head, and then I'd like to try to do some evaluation through this method.
Yeah.
When you're doing your normal daily activities around your house there, when do you feel it just doing normal daily stuff?
It's very dependent on the day, I feel like, and how much it's acting up on me. Like right now, and it's not like a feeling that's often been, but it's actually on the side more, like in this area rather than in the front. I'm actually not feeling it much in the flexor itself, but for whatever reason, I have like a soreness in the side. Sometimes just like, if I'm stretching out after waking up in bed or something, I might feel it if it's getting particularly bad, or if I'm stepping down from a stair or a step or something, I might. It hasn't been super consistent, which is frustrating.
And when you're stepping down, you feel it more on the side than in the front.
I'd say it depends. Hasn't been super consistent, but it does feel like it goes around the hip at points.
Okay. All right. One more question popped up in my head, and then we'll do a little bit of an evaluation. Of all of the things you've tried at home to try to improve this on your own before reaching out, what do you think has been most helpful based on what you've tried to do self-management wise?
Yeah, so it took me a while to try to figure out what actually helps, and most things haven't seemed to help a whole lot. Stretching almost seems to aggravate things more. The one thing that I found that seems to consistently help is using a little trigger point type ball, hard foam ball, right in the hip flexor, the front of the hip, and just all around that, even, sort of where I would guess the psoas would be, in trying to loosen up that area. That seems to have helped the most. And sometimes when I try to take that ball and do it on the side or even almost the rear of the hip and low back and everything, and like I think some of that actually might be what's making me like sore right now, because I sort of get in there pretty deep.
Okay.
So
You're trying to fix it, so you're using some oomph on it.
yeah, I mean, it's body weight on a pretty small hard ball.
Yeah.
So yeah, that seems to be the most helpful. I'm not sure if it's helpful when I'm doing it on the side and in the back, but in the front, it seems to react positively to that.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing all that. I have some ideas in terms of what's going on, and also some tests that'll help confirm or make me think more about what's going on. You have shoes on, or you're barefoot, or?
I currently have sandals on, but I have my shoes right next to me, and can be barefoot as well.
I'd rather have you barefooted. It doesn't matter if it's in the RV or on the ground. Possibly on the ground is better.
Yeah, I've actually got a mat set up right here.
Okay, perfect.
So
okay, let's go ahead and stand over there. Can you go stand on the mat? There you go. And then I want you to bring your feet together. And then I want you to pivot backwards at the waist. So just bend backwards.
Yep.
And come back to neutral. And does that give the hip any feedback at all?
Not particularly.
Okay.
No, I didn't feel anything much there.
Okay, bend down, touch the toes.
Okay.
Okay, come back up. And I'm guessing that's fine.
Yep.
Okay, twist at the waist both ways, look over the shoulders.
Okay.
And that's fine there.
Yes.
Okay, and it's the left hip flexor.
Yes. Right now it's behaving pretty well since I haven't ran the past few days.
Okay. Let's do
Admittedly.
this. Go ahead and stand just on the right foot. So bend the left knee ever so slightly so you're on one foot. And
Okay.
I want you to pivot in that right hip socket. So just kind of twist only on the right leg.
With certain direction or?
Just both ways. Okay, so that's what good feels like. Now do that on the left leg and see if that does anything at all.
Not much. I mean, maybe at the extreme ranges.
Okay. And do you feel that in the front, side, or back?
Uh, Not the back, more the side to front.
Side.
Especially with it feeling sore right now, sort of the side.
All right. Can you go ahead and lie on your back?
Yep. There we go.
So we would do this test on you at every appointment, but I would do it on you so you were 100% passive. And
Yep.
so I want to do this on your right leg first. I want a 90-degree angle at the hip. So from the femur to the spine, and then from the femur to your tibia. Yep, perfect. And then go ahead and do windshield wipers with your shin. So go out with the foot, in with the foot.
Like that?
Yeah, try to keep the knee right above the hip. So that's coming from but I want it from the hip. That's coming from the knee. So pivot but keep the femur vertical. So keep the femur vertical, and then bring the right foot out towards the side of your deck there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like that. Yep, perfect. And then the other way. And that actually looks really good, and that doesn't give the right hip any feedback.
Nope, nothing at all.
Okay, let's try that on the left leg. This is the one I'm most curious about.
Okay.
How's that?
It's causing me to feel a little something on the outward.
Okay. All right, that's what I was expecting. But the total motion actually looks really good.
Yep.
All right. You can come on up.
I just sit up right here.
You're still working with the same coach.
Yes.
Okay. He knows what's going on, or she knows what's going on.
Yep, he does. We sort of grew things pretty consistently. Seemed to be on a good track, and then once things started becoming, realized that it wasn't about to go away, and especially with races now not being on the schedule, we really backed things off on their own. In the past week or so, we tried to build things back up a little bit more, see how it reacted, because it had seemingly gone away again. And then after the third or fourth run back, I started getting the feelings again. So I had, a few runs in there where it was, seemed to be all in the clear. But then as I started building again, it pretty quickly came back.
Gotcha. Here's my impression. Your coach and you did a really good job finding ways to improve your cardiac output without the expense on your soft tissues last summer and fall.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really, really smart. It sounded like it paid off in your favor. I know you were ambitious last year and you wanted to place a little bit higher than 4th or 5th, but all things considered, that's pretty darn solid.
Yeah, couldn't complain too much.
I have some ideas in terms of exercises that will help relieve some of the pressure that I think is happening on your hip flexors. I'm going to send you a couple of videos. One of them, I think I had you do last year as well, called the pelvic scoop. Do you remember me giving you the pelvic scoop? The reason I like it is it's not a hip flexor stretch as much as it is a strengthening exercise for your glutes. And I like it in a half knee. So we most of the time we call them pelvic tilts, but the reason I like the position of the half kneeling position is if this is your femur and here's your hip, okay, and then your spine's right above it, you can put your knee slightly in front of your hip to create an angle there and then do isolated pelvic tilts on the one side so you're not further irritating that hip flexor. And I believe that will relieve some of the pressure and tension that's on the front side of your hip, and you'll temporarily need to change your running mileage until your soft tissues are able to withstand increased volume.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like your coach, you're more in touch with him. You're probably talking to him on a daily basis.
Yeah, pretty frequent contact. Yeah.
Okay. So he'll know. What I would like you guys to do is try to track the variables with your running. So speed, duration, pace, and try to put those into a formula that says that this is what's doable, and then slightly go up on those different variables.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, we were doing pretty similarly before. I'd say, I mean, probably 95% of my running is what I consider easier aerobic. I really found that I don't need a whole lot of speed work in the run to be successful. Probably because of the carryover effect of things. And then we're pretty diligent on the mileage aspect, increasing with each session as we're building back up, and then as on a macro level as well, sort of increasing mileage over time.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're being smart. Very good. What other questions do you have for me?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've done most or attempted most of the things that could potentially, relieve or quicken the process of it getting better, and most of them don't seem to affect too much outside of like the trigger point or the massage. I have heard of like the So Right tool, which supposedly gets in your psoas better, but I've heard mixed reviews on that. I didn't know if that was something I should consider or just keep using that little ball.
I've heard about it. I haven't investigated it like a ton. I think there's better things that you can choose. So strengthening the glutes, I'm going to send you some side planks I think would be helpful.
Okay.
And then also doing step-ups. I think step-ups would be really helpful, where you can, you're strengthening your glutes because you're kind of doing a pelvic tilt, but you're weight bearing.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're stepping up onto something, there's additional challenge of balance, which I think will help provide your hips some stability and relieve the front part of the hip flexor area as well. And then once we're able to visit in person, we can look at it again and see if there's any additional soft tissue work that's needed.
Yeah, and also of note that I don't think I mentioned earlier is I think last December I did start focusing a bit more on specific strength work. Actually in the gym, squats, deadlifts, bunch more specific type of things to try to address the hips and that area in general as well. I was working with Adam Ford at Ridgeline Fitness, and he was helping me with a lot of more specific exercises, try to strengthen that area. Obviously, right now I'm not, really have access because they're all closed. But I've been trying to get in good body weight stuff, and that's all that. Trying to make sure I'm not doing too much to aggravate it, but also strengthen it enough in a smart way.
Cool. All of what I heard, I believe, will be helpful as well. What I'd like to do is touch base about a week from now, and then I'm going to want to hear your mileage, your other training, logs. I want to hear what your training logs were like, and then if it's getting better or worse.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I don't think so for now. I'll make sure to do all those exercises, and hopefully it responds well to everything, and can get back on a more consistent running schedule.
Definitely. Cool. Well, I will talk to you soon.